You were born not to the sound of sirens, but to the hum of an old ceiling fan in a hospital in Fayetteville, North Carolina, 20 minutes from Fort Bragg. Your earliest childhood was not spent among backyard barbecues and white picket fences, but among military bases, sunburned training fields, and the quiet conversations of men who never laughed too loudly. Our father was an airborne sergeant, a man with knees ruined by jumps and a face that never seemed to relax, even in sleep. Your mother was a nurse at a military hospital, and she knew the smell of blood, bleach, and bad news. You grew up in a family where shoes were always lined up neatly by the door, where a bed had to be made with corners sharp enough to cut skin, and where the word weakness was said like it was some kind of disease. It seemed to you that nobody had planned your future in advance. But looking back now, you understand that it had been carved into you long before you understood what fear really was. The 1990s. Childhood on military installations. You changed schools more often than other kids changed sneakers. Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, then back again. In every new classroom, you learned to stay quiet at first, to study who the leader was, who the coward was, who would throw the first punch. You were never the biggest kid and never the smartest, but you learned the rules fast. At school, the children split naturally into two camps, those whose parents wore the uniform, and those who could never understand why your father disappeared for 6 months without warning and came back different every time. They mocked your army haircut, your habit of saying yes sir to teachers, your refusal to complain. One day in 4th grade, a boy shoved your little sister near the school bus. You did not punch him. You drove your forehead straight into his nose the way your father had once shown you behind the house. Blood. Screaming. The principal's office. That evening, you waited to be punished, but your father only looked at you for a long time and asked, "Did you win?" You nodded. He said, "Then next time, do it in a way that doesn't get you caught." That was your first lesson. Not about honor. About results. September 11, 2001. You are 15. History class. The teacher wheels in a television on a metal cart, something usually reserved for documentaries about the Civil War. At first, everyone thinks it is some tragic accident. Then the second plane hits the tower. The classroom goes so quiet it feels as though someone has sucked all the air out of it. A girl in the front row starts crying. The teacher sits down. Nobody knows what to say. You come home and find your father in front of the TV. He is not blinking. The remote lies untouched on the coffee table. On the screen there is smoke, ash, people running through the streets of New York. Your father says only one sentence. This is going to be a long war. At the time, you do not know that this war will eat 20 years of your life, hollow you out, and send you back old before you have even reached middle age. 2002, Recruitment. While your classmates are thinking about college, football, and prom, you are already running in the mornings with a backpack full of bricks. You like the feeling that your life has a direction. You never say it out loud, but what pulls you is not glory or patriotic commercials. It is clarity. In the military, everything looks simple. There are yours and there are theirs. There is an order and there is obedience. There is fear, but it can be hidden inside discipline. The recruiter sits in a small office with a Marine poster on the wall and a coffee machine that pours out bitter black sludge. He smiles too confidently, like a salesman who already knows the customer will buy. He talks about brotherhood, benefits, honor, the chance to become a man. You sign the papers on your 18th birthday. Your mother cries in the parking lot. Your father shakes your hand like you are no longer a boy. There is pride in his eyes, but deeper than that, something heavier. The exhaustion of a man who already knows the true cost of noble words. Basic training breaks you quickly and without sentiment. South Carolina. Summer heat. Sweat. Sand in your boots. The drill instructor's voice crashing across the yard like artillery. You thought you were prepared because you grew up around soldiers. You were wrong. Nobody cares whose son you are here. You are just a body with a number, expected to move faster, shoot straighter, and talk less. By the first week, the skin on your feet is rubbed raw. By the second, you learn how to sleep sitting up. By the third, you stop counting push-ups and start counting only the minutes until lights out. Men break in different ways. One sobs under his blanket at night. Another starts provoking punishment just to feel something. A third smiles every day and then vanishes home on a medical discharge. You stay. Not because you are stronger than everyone else. Because the thought of returning unfinished feels worse than the pain. The first time they put a rifle in your hands and you feel its weight, it is not excitement. It is responsibility, cold and heavy in your stomach. 2003, your first years of service pass in the shadow of Iraq, but you are being prepared for Afghanistan. Mountain warfare. Dust. Thin air. Patrolling villages whose names most Americans cannot pronounce correctly anyway. You are assigned to an infantry unit, then moved into convoy escort work. You spend months on ranges and training grounds, learning how to recognize an ambush from a road that is too empty, from a market that is too quiet, from a boy on a motorcycle riding too close to a Humvee. You learn to look at roadside trash as a possible bomb, at a smile as a mask, at silence as a warning. An instructor, an older veteran from another era, tells you, if everything inside you feels calm, you're either dead already or you don't understand where you are. You laugh with the others, but that sentence stays with you longer than any tactical drill. 2004, Afghanistan for the first time. The aircraft opens, and the air of Bagram hits you at once, dry, dusty, smelling of burnt fuel, hot metal, and foreign ground. The mountains in the distance look unreal, like scenery painted for a movie, but everything else is too real. Generators hum. Helicopters rip across the sky. At night you lie on a folding cot in a long tent while someone snores beyond the fabric wall, someone writes a letter home, someone else cleans his weapon for the third time that day. You stare at the ceiling and realize that even if your body leaves this place unbroken, something in you will never return the same. Your area of responsibility is a network of roads between small outposts and a handful of villages in Paktia province. On paper, the mission is called security and support for local forces. In practice, it means driving through places where people want to kill you but almost never let you see their faces. A day here does not begin at sunrise. It begins with checking the vehicle. Armor. Fuel. Radio. Ammunition. Water. Medical kit. Tourniquets. Spare batteries. You learn to love routine because routine offers the illusion of control, and control is the only thing standing between order and slaughter. Your sergeants say, the most dangerous mistake is to start thinking you're used to this. A month later, you understand exactly what they mean. Your first firefight lasts less than 3 minutes and stretches forever in your memory. The convoy is moving along a dirt road, mud walls on the right, a dry riverbed on the left. Then the cracks begin, not like movies, but flat and hard, like boards snapping. Rounds hit the armor. The radio erupts. The driver curses. Someone yells the direction of contact. You expose yourself only enough to see flashes on the slope. You fire in bursts and do not even feel the recoil. The world shrinks to your sight picture, the dust, and the command contact right. Then it stops as suddenly as it began. One of your guys is hit in the neck by flying stone fragments. You kneel beside him, pressing a bandage down, watching the blood seep through dark and steady. He is shaking and says, "Tell my wife I didn't shit myself." You laugh from pure nerves, though you want to throw up. That night you understand for the first time that heroism is almost never beautiful. It smells like dust, sweat, fear, and blood soaking through latex gloves. Then the IEDs come. Improvised explosive devices. The real masters of this war. Not bullets. Not dramatic assaults. Not the movies about special operations. A road you have driven 10 times can explode beneath your wheels on the 11th. You begin to look at the ground the way religious men look at heaven. A rock out of place. A pile of garbage too fresh. A wire. New footprints along the shoulder. A man who stepped away too quickly. A little girl watching not you, but the space behind you. Your explosive specialist becomes the most important man in the convoy, almost a kind of priest. When he says stop, everything stops. When he says go around, you go around, even if it feels ridiculous. In Afghanistan, paranoia is not a sickness. It is how you stay alive until evening. 2005, you lose your first friend. His name is Mike Reed. A funny kid from Ohio who chewed beef jerky like it was oxygen and told disgusting jokes at exactly the wrong moments. You met in training. He was the kind of person who could make exhaustion and filth feel temporary. That day his vehicle is second in the convoy. The blast lifts it as if a giant fist had punched upward through the road. It is not a movie fireball. It is a pillar of dirt, smoke, steel, and force. You run toward the overturned vehicle even though you know there could be a secondary device waiting to kill anyone who comes to help. You run anyway. You shout. You grab at burning metal. You see blood, straps, shattered seat foam, something on fire, something your mind refuses to name. When they pull Mike out, his face is gone, or rather still there in pieces, enough for your brain to reject it completely. That night you sit on an ammunition crate behind the tent and smoke your first cigarette. It shreds your throat. Your sergeant sits beside you, says nothing for a minute, then speaks quietly. Remember this. You can't die for every man. But you're going to live because of every one of them. You do not understand it then. Later, you will hear that sentence in your head in the worst hours of your life. You go home for 2 weeks of leave, and America feels fake. Supermarkets are too clean. There are too many cereal choices. People scream at each other in parking lots over spaces like it matters. Your mother cooks too much food, your sister talks non-stop, the neighbors clap you on the back and say thank you for your service without ever really looking into your eyes. At a local baseball game they ask you and the other service members to stand, and the whole stadium applauds. You smile, but inside you feel nothing. They are not clapping for you. They are clapping for their own idea of you. None of them has smelled the inside of a vehicle after a blast. None of them knows how quiet it gets after an explosion, when your ears are still ringing and you already know one of your own is gone. You sleep in your childhood room and wake at 3:17 because the air conditioner clicks in the exact same rhythm as the sound of a foreign rifle bolt on a checkpoint. Your father stands in the doorway without turning on the light. He asks, "How many days left?" You answer, 3. He nods. Both of you understand that you are not home. You are just temporarily somewhere else. 2006 to 2008. Repeat deployments. War does not look like a movie where there is one giant battle and then a victorious ending. It looks like an endless sequence of the same roads, new commanders, old jokes, dirty socks, burned-out generators, briefings where arrows on a map pretend to describe order that does not exist in reality. You learn to live from rotation to rotation. Home. Short leave. Preparation. Another flight. Another dusty airfield. Another mouthful of grit. Every time you return, you become better at being a soldier and worse at being a person. Not cruel in the dramatic sense. Just flatter. You feel less, speak less, fall asleep faster after bad days, and understand civilians less and less. You know calibers, weapon systems, call signs, medevac procedures, and how long a man can keep talking after a chest wound. But you become almost incapable of carrying an ordinary conversation at a dinner table. One night in Ghazni province, you move into a village after a raid. Intelligence says a Taliban courier is inside one of the compounds. Instead, the house is full of women, children, and one old man who understands almost no English but understands the important part perfectly well. Armed strangers have entered his home in darkness. The interpreter explains that you are looking for weapons and one specific man. The old man looks at you as if you are not a soldier at all, but a flood, a fire, some disaster of nature. In one corner you notice a boy maybe 8 years old, holding a toy car with one wheel missing, staring at your rifle. He has the same expression you imagine you would have worn if armed men in a foreign uniform had burst into your parents' house at night. Later, you find the hidden cache buried in the yard. Intelligence had been right after all. But there is no relief. Only the ugly feeling that even when you do everything by the book, something dirty remains on your hands. 2009, you get married. Not because the war is over. Not because life has finally become stable. But because people your age are supposed to do things that resemble normal life, and you try to fit yourself inside that shape. Her name is Emily. You meet through mutual friends at a bar near the base. She laughs honestly, knows how to listen, and does not ask stupid questions like have you ever killed anyone on the second date. You fall in love not with romance, but with the quiet around her. With her, you do not have to be funny, hard, or composed. You can just sit on the floor eating Chinese takeout from boxes. You marry quickly because the military has its own sense of time. When you can be sent away next month, people stop believing in postponement. At the wedding, your father drinks too much, your mother cries, and you stand there in uniform thinking about how many of your friends never lived long enough to appear in photos like these. 2010, Helmand. Your hardest deployment. The heat is so brutal the air above the ground shimmers like a furnace. Dust works its way under your nails, into magazines, between your teeth, into prayer itself. Here the war comes closer. Not just IEDs now, but ambushes, mortars, nighttime attacks on outposts. You are sent into an area where every field might be seeded with explosives, every ditch might be an approach lane, every wall might hide a rifleman. You are no longer new. You lead younger men. You teach them to listen to silence and not stare where everybody else is staring, because the shot usually comes from somewhere else. That is where the day happens, the one that returns in your dreams more than any other. Morning patrol. Routine mission. Reach the canal, meet local police, speak to a village elder, get back before the worst heat of the day. You are third in line. Ahead of you walks a new kid named Vega. 19. Texas. Got his braces off only last year. He is talking about his mother's tacos when the ground under him opens. The blast throws you into an irrigation ditch. The world vanishes in white noise. By the time your hearing comes back, you are already crawling toward him. Below the knee, almost nothing is left. He is screaming in a way that will outlive every speech by every general and politician you ever hear. You slap on one tourniquet, then another, yell for the medic, clamp your hands over the wound through your gloves, and the blood still pushes through between your fingers with hot slippery force. Vega grabs your shoulder and keeps saying, "Don't let me die, Sergeant, don't let me die." The helicopter comes fast. Very fast, by military standards. But time in moments like that is not measured in minutes. It is measured in blood loss. Vega survives. He loses his leg, his career, part of his youth, but he lives. You should feel relief. Instead, that night, sitting behind the defensive wall, all you can think is that your hands still remember his blood even after washing them 3 times. After that deployment, something in you breaks quietly. Not with screaming in your sleep, not with punching holes in walls, not with a bottle in your fist on the first night home. You simply become distant. Emily says you sit at the table physically present but somehow absent anyway. You forget to turn off the stove. You check the locks 3 times before bed. In grocery stores you cannot stand with your back to the entrance. On the 4th of July, fireworks crack overhead and you drop to one knee behind a car before you even understand what you are doing, and your little nephew stares at you as if you transformed into someone else right in front of him. Emily suggests talking to somebody. You tell her you're fine. In the military, that translates roughly to I am not fine, but I would rather rot inside than say it out loud. You keep serving because service is the only place where your damage does not look like a defect. It looks like professional conditioning. 2011, Osama bin Laden is dead. The base erupts. Men shout, launch flares, drag out hidden beer. The commander gives a speech about justice, duty fulfilled, a turning point in history. You listen and feel a strange hollowness. Yes, it matters. Yes, you remember September 11th. Yes, people have waited nearly a decade for this. But Mike does not come back. The roads in Helmand do not become less deadly because of one announcement. Vega does not grow a leg back. Your nights do not become quieter. You watch the younger troops celebrate and realize that for them this is a symbol. For you it is only another point on a very long line that still refuses to end. 2012 to 2014. You rise in rank. Now there are younger men looking at you the way you once looked at your sergeants. You know how to write reports, run briefings, control idiots, complete paperwork for the families of the dead, and act as if everything is under control. You become the man who knocks on doors. The man who sits across from a mother or a wife and delivers rehearsed phrases about courage, sacrifice, and the gratitude of a nation. After those visits, you drive to an empty parking lot, switch off the engine, and sit there until your hands stop shaking. You begin to understand that war is not really made of firefights. It is made of aftermath. Paperwork. Medals handed to parents instead of sons. Duffel bags that still smell like the man who used to carry them. Dogs waiting at doors that will never open for the same person again. Your marriage begins to crack without one dramatic betrayal. Emily does not cheat on you. She does not scream. She simply gets tired of living beside a man who smiles on schedule and hugs like someone afraid to be caught without a weapon. One evening she says, I always feel like I'm competing with a place inside you that I can't reach. And I lose every time. You want to tell her she is wrong, but you cannot, because she is not. Part of you is still stuck somewhere between Paktia and Helmand, under layers of dust, blood, radio static, and unfinished fear. In 2014 you divorce quietly, almost politely. You split the furniture, the bank accounts, and 10 years of things never properly said. When she walks out with the last box, the apartment becomes the perfect trap. Clean. Silent. Empty. That night you drink until whole hours vanish. 2015 to 2018. Officially, the war changes shape. A new phase. New language. Training and support. Limited presence. Advisory mission. Politicians in Washington change the vocabulary faster than soldiers change batteries in radios. But the ground in Afghanistan does not read press releases. You go back as an older senior sergeant working with Afghan forces. Now your job is not always to fight directly, but to teach others how to patrol, clear roads, hold positions, and plan operations. In theory, this is the road toward ending the war. In practice, it means watching young Afghan soldiers die for villages that will belong to nobody again in a month. Some of them are brave to the point of madness. Some are corrupt. Some just want a salary and a chance not to starve. You sit with a local commander in a dusty room with carpets hung on the walls, sipping tea so sweet it hurts your teeth, while he swears his men will hold the district. A week later half of them are gone in the night, taking ammunition with them. You become close with an Afghan interpreter named Farid. Thin, quick, always tired-looking, with English learned from war and American movies. He has a wife, 2 daughters, and a brother working in Kabul. He jokes that he understands Americans better than Americans understand themselves. He translates not just words, but motives. He knows when an elder is lying, when a village is afraid, when someone is stalling, and when negotiations are about to collapse. You trust him more than some officers. One day he asks, when you leave, what happens to us? You answer honestly. I don't know. He nods like he expected nothing else. It is probably the most truthful conversation of your entire war. 2019, by now you are burned down to stone. The young call you a legend. The old call you dependable. Command respects your calm. You know how to settle a panicking lieutenant, how to tell from a soldier's face that he cannot survive another deployment, how to phrase a report diplomatically enough to keep an angry colonel from exploding. But you cannot help yourself. At night you see faces again. Not enemies. Yours. Mike. Vega with his eyes huge from pain. Jones the machine gunner, to whom you promised a cigar after coming home, and who burned alive in a vehicle. The Afghan boy with the toy car missing a wheel. Farid, who hugged you before you left in 2019 and said, if things get bad, don't forget we were not just your mission. We were people. You had no answer for that, so you just told him, take care of your daughters. You both understood that might not be enough. 2020, the talk of withdrawal grows louder. Briefings contain more politics than tactics. You hear words like agreement, transition, force reduction. Among the troops, it is translated into a simpler language. Who stays? Who covers? Who gets left behind? How long until the next chaos? By then you no longer believe in grand promises. Too many times you have watched reality mock neat plans on paper. Still, even inside you, some weak hope stirs. Maybe this is the end. Not victory. Not triumph. Just an end. Sometimes an end is a luxury. 2021, Kabul. August. Everything collapses faster than even cynics expected. Cities fall one after another as if someone is yanking nails from a house coming apart. On screens there is chaos. People running toward the airport. Crowds. Razor wire. Children in arms. Warning shots. A kind of despair that cannot fit into an official summary. You are sent not on a major combat mission, but into evacuation operations. It sounds easier. It is hell in another form. You stand at the airport gates in body armor, older than almost everybody around you, staring into the faces of thousands who want in because outside the wire means prison, death, revenge, disappearance. In your hand is a list, and the list decides who gets through and who stays. In all your years of war, you have fired weapons, dragged wounded men, made decisions under attack. Nothing feels heavier than looking at a father holding the wrong documents and telling him there is no more room. A woman lifting a baby toward you over the wire. An old man screaming the name of an interpreter you cannot find in the system. For American bureaucracy, war ends with procedures. For human beings, it ends with screaming at a gate. Then the blast at Abbey Gate. Blood again. Torn uniforms again. That same hard ringing in your ears again. Young faces again, faces that should not have ended here. You drop to a knee beside a wounded Marine and realize something terrible. Over 20 years the scenery changed, the slogans changed, the presidents changed, but the taste of the war at the end is the same as it always was. Metal in the mouth. Smoke. Burning. The sense that everybody was lied to, just in different ways. When the transport plane lifts off and Kabul sinks below you, nobody cheers. Somebody sleeps sitting up. Somebody stares at the floor. Somebody grips a phone full of messages from people who will never get out. You look down at your gloves and understand that this is the end of an era not only for a country, but for the only world in which you ever truly knew how to function. Coming home turns out to be worse than most deployments. Not because it is dangerous. Because it is too quiet. People meet you at the airport with flags, gratitude, banners, awkward hugs. On television, politicians argue over blame, timelines, inherited disasters, and responsibility. Experts draw diagrams. Veterans in bars either sit in silence or curse at the screens. You sit in your truck outside the VA clinic and cannot force yourself through the door for the first counseling appointment, because some part of you believes that if you give the pain an official name, it will become more real. But it is already real. You cannot sleep without alcohol. You cannot sit with your back to a door. You cannot watch the news, but you cannot stop watching it either. You search the internet for evacuation lists and Farid's name. 4 days. 4 weeks. Sometimes you think you found him, then it turns out to be another man. This new war takes place inside your skull and on the glowing screen of your phone. By 2022 you are 40. On paper, not old. In your bones, ancient. Your body sends the bill at last. A knee wrecked by jumping from a vehicle in 2008. A back bent by armor and marches. Constant ringing in your ears. Blood pressure. Sleep apnea. The doctor at the veterans clinic flips through your file and reads off diagnoses like he is listing menu items. PTSD. Anxiety disorder. Major depressive episode. Chronic pain. Possible traumatic brain injury from a blast concussion. You laugh, because if you do not laugh, you might dissolve on the floor. The doctor does not take offense. He has probably seen hundreds exactly like you. You try to live as a civilian. Security work. Then training. Then logistics. At interviews, people say they respect your experience but do not know how to use it. You know how to move a convoy through a mined region, organize evacuation under fire, and read a man from tiny movements in his eyes. They need someone who can fill in spreadsheets and smile at clients. You feel like an expensive tool built for a machine that no longer exists. Too specialized. Too heavy. Too loud for the modern office. Sometimes you meet other veterans. One got fat. One has been divorced 3 times. One sells insurance. One sleeps in his pickup because he cannot keep up with rent and medication together. These gatherings are full of black humor, too much coffee, and too little sleep. You speak of the dead more easily than of the living, because the dead no longer change and can no longer disappoint you. One guy asks, "So we lost, right?" Another says, "Depends what you thought the game was." Everybody laughs, but the laughter comes out wooden and dry. You realize that post-war life is not a return. It is a new territory without a map, where the mines are laid inside you. Then one winter day, a message comes from an unknown number. A picture. Farid. Grayer than he should be. Standing in a small apartment somewhere in Virginia. Underneath the photo, "We made it. The girls are in school. Thank you, brother." You stare at the screen so long it goes dark in your hand. You wake it again with your thumb and read the words once more. It does not erase 20 years. It does not bring back the dead. It does not justify politicians. But for the first time in a very long while, you feel not only loss. Also something dangerously close to meaning. Tiny. Stubborn. Human. A few months later you pull your old duffel bag out of the closet. At the bottom are medals, patches, photographs, letters, and dust still trickling from the pocket of an old uniform, though you do not understand how it stayed there all these years. In one photograph you are very young, grinning beside Mike in front of a vehicle, like there is a football game ahead instead of war. In another, your whole platoon stands filthy, furious, exhausted, alive. In another, you and Farid are leaning against a wall, holding little plastic cups of sweet tea, both of you half-dead tired. You sit on the floor in the middle of the room and, for the first time in years, you do not turn away from memory. You do not drown it in whiskey. You do not lock it back in a box. You just sit there with it. And then you understand something horribly simple. The military gave you purpose. The war made you addicted to that purpose. And life after war demands that you decide for yourself why to get out of bed each morning. That turns out to be harder than anything else. Harder than an assault. Harder than a ruck march. Harder than an evacuation under fire. An ordinary morning becomes the real test. Make coffee. Take your pills. Call your mother. Answer a friend. Go to the support group. Do not disappear. For the country, that sounds small. For you, it is a daily operation to hold the line. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, you still wake because a garbage truck outside sounds for 1 second like a helicopter. Sometimes your hand reaches for a rifle that has not been there for years before you are even fully awake. Sometimes you hate the entire world for how normal it seems. And sometimes you sit on the porch of a rented house, watching the neighbors walk their dog, watching the school bus take kids away, watching the wind move the flag at the gas station, and you think that maybe life is not a reward and not a mission. Maybe it is simply what remains, and it needs defending too. You never became a hero carved into stone. You never became a politician, a best-selling memoirist, or a cable news face. You became what thousands become after a long war, a man who learned how to carry a weight that cannot be set down, only shared. When people ask who you were, sometimes you say, infantry. Sometimes, veteran. Sometimes you say nothing, because no single word can contain 20 years of dust, fear, brotherhood, rage, grief, and emptiness. You were a boy from a military town. A sergeant's son. A recruit who wanted clarity. A soldier, a sergeant, a husband, a divorced husband, a mentor, a survivor, a witness to the end of a war. And now, with all of that behind you, you finally understand something important. The war was not your whole life. It only spent a very long time pretending to be.